Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming this afternoon, this significant day, not only because of the solar eclipse, but for UHD's Quality Enhancement Plan. It's a very crucial moment for us, and I thank our presenters this afternoon for their time, their knowledge, and the expertise. My special thanks also to the QEP Steering Committee members, those who are sitting here in the auditorium as well as online. You all have worked so hard. We are at the stage of QEP identification, and that means which presenters and their topic would go through as the final QEP for the institution. And then, as you all know, just to give you briefly, the QEP topic identification, once the QEP is finalized, then the QEP moves into a developmental stage. And that is where we develop different aspects of the QEP. And then finally, the last phase is the implementation plan phase, where we might have a pilot, we do collect data on certain items, and I call it QEP year 0. So we are right now at the verge of the QEP topic identification phase. It's a very crucial phase, and we have a survey that's going out to faculty and staff. Please do encourage faculty and staff to fill that survey. And those who are here, you're most welcome to use the QR code given at the table here. And complete that as we are going through the presentations. Also, for the QEP Steering Committee, we have a rubric that I know one of the QEP Steering Committee members had put together, and Tim was saying you could use 0 to 10 scale instead of the broad range, and there are numbers just as sample given there, but you don't have to use those. I just didn't get time to erase them. So with that note, further ado, I would like to welcome our first presenters. Our first topic, readers. Leaders are readers. And Paul team, please give them a round of applause.
Thank you all very, very much. It's a pleasure to be here. The very first thing I want to get out of the way is that most of the really good stuff in this presentation is a result of my co-authors on the project, Paul Kinsley, Professor of English, Associate Professor of English, and Lee Usnick, Professor of Business Law here at UHD. The three of us are extremely passionate about our teaching. And we have put together a detailed PowerPoint slide deck for your viewing pleasure. But one of the things that we talked about is we knew that we could cover that material in about 5 minutes, probably about 1 minute per slide without difficulty. And what we wanted to do is in today's presentation is what we try to do in our classrooms. We prefer to show whenever we can rather than tell. And so our presentation today is about exciting our students, exciting our UHD community about reading. And so what we're going to do for the first 5 minutes of today's presentation is we're going to do a grand experiment. I'm going to see if in the next 5 minutes I can excite you about reading this book. This is a book entitled Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. Now, why did I choose this particular book to talk about? Well, there's 3 reasons. First, at a surface level, this is the kind of book young people love to read. It's about climbing Mount Everest. Mount Everest is cool, okay? And even though, well, I see some young people in the audience, I also see some that I would call young at heart, okay? But Mount Everest is cool. And so at the first level, this book is about 30 or 40 people scattered across 3 expeditions who are trying to climb Mount Everest. But at a second, deeper level, it's really a cathartic memoir. The author is a journalist named Jon Krakauer. In his 20s, he did mountain climbing. Then he fell in love in his early 30s with a fellow climber. And he and she decided, we've got to grow up So they stopped climbing, and he became a writer and began writing dozens and dozens, hundreds of articles for magazines devoted to mountain climbing and hiking and the like. And then out of the blue, one of those magazines said, if you're willing to climb Everest and write about it, we'll pay for it. And that's $60,000 to $70,000 in 1996 dollars is what that is. And so he decided he wanted to join the expeditions in 1996 and climb Everest. Those of you who remember your history will remember that was a catastrophic year. Out of the 40 or 50 people you meet in this book, 12 died. So I want you to think about this room, okay? For the benefit of those at home, we have a pretty good audience here today. Imagine, the statistics are well established. 1 out of every 4 people who attempt to summit Everest will die in the attempt. And these 40 or 50 people lived together for 60 days, acclimatizing and planning their summit day. And 12 to 15 of them died in the effort. So think about that. Your friends died. Why did I live? Why did they die? And could I have done something differently? This is a person who's dealing with an enormous amount of survivor's guilt. And so that's a second layer in the novel or in the memoir. And then the third and final layer is this. This is a memoir about vanity and ambition and obsession. And I'd like all of you to look around the room. We have some pretty ambitious people here. My good friend Emily Leffler, first one in the morning, turning the lights on, last one to leave. Timothy Radel, he's also got the ambition bug, okay? I see my good friend Travis Crone, one of the bright lights in his college. Again, driven people. And what I'd like all of you to think about, you, Emily, you, Timothy, you, Travis, and everybody else in the room and everybody listening to this recording, what would you be willing to sacrifice in the service of your ambition? Your friends? Your marriage? Your relationship with your kids? Would you be willing to put your life at risk? Those are the kinds of questions that are present in Moby Dick, in Macbeth, and also in John Krakauer's book, Into Thin Air. So I'm going to read you 60 seconds out of this book. And I want you to think about, if you were having the conversation with your wife or your husband or your significant other, would you handle that conversation as well as John Krakauer did? He screwed it up. He completely blew it. Would you do any better? Final comment. I checked our UHD catalog last night. We have no courses on the topic of ambition. Okay, so when I first met Linda, she had been a climber herself, an exceptionally gifted one, but she'd given it up after breaking her arm, injuring her back, and subsequently making a cold appraisal of the inherent risks. Linda would never have considered asking me to abandon the sport, but the announcement that I intended to quit had reinforced her decision to marry me. However, I'd failed to appreciate the grip climbing had on my life, the grip that it had on my soul, the purpose it lent to my otherwise rudderless life. I didn't anticipate the void that would loom in its absence. Within a year, I sneaked my rope out of storage and was back on the rock. By 1984, when I went to Switzerland to climb a notoriously dangerous alpine wall called the Eiger Norwand, Linda and I had advanced to within millimeters of splitting up, and my climbing lay at the core of our troubles. Our relationship remained rocky for 2 or 3 years after my failed attempt on the Eiger, but the marriage somehow survived that rough patch. Linda came to accept my climbing. She saw it as a crucial, if perplexing, part of who I was. Mountaineering, she understood, was an essential expression of some odd, immutable aspect of my personality that I could no sooner change than the color of my eyes. Then, in the midst of this delicate rapprochement, Outside Magazine confirmed it was sending me to Everest. At first, I pretended that I'd be going as a journalist more than as a climber, that I'd accepted the assignment because the commercialization of Everest was an interesting subject and the money was pretty good. I explained to Linda and anyone else who expressed skepticism about my Himalayan qualifications that I didn't expect to ascend very high on the mountain. I'll probably climb only a little way above base camp, I insisted, just to get a taste of what high altitude is all about. This was bullshit, of course. Given the length of the trip and the time I'd have to spend training for it, I stood to make a lot more money staying home and taking other writing jobs. I accepted the assignment because I was in the grip of the Everest mystique. In truth, I wanted to climb the mountain as badly as I'd ever wanted anything in my life. From the moment I agreed to go to Nepal, my intention was to ascend every bit as high as my unexceptional legs and lungs would carry me. By the time Linda drove me to the airport, she had long since seen through my lies. She sensed the true dimensions of my desire, and it scared her. If you get killed, she argued with a mix of despair and anger, it's not just you who will pay the price. I'll have to pay too, for the rest of my life. Doesn't that matter to you? Nobody's going to get killed, I answered. Don't be melodramatic. So that's the kind of experience that we want our students to have. We want them to step inside other souls and take up topics that they're not getting inside the curricular learning objectives associated with our degree programs. And how can we do that for them? How can we expose them to other souls, other experiences, lessons about ambition, about life, about relationships? How do we do that? We do that through QEPs like this one. And I'll add, through QEPs like the 2 QEP finalist presentations that follow ours. All 3 of our presentations have one common thread. We're trying to do more than just instruct on the various learning objectives in our degree programs. So, on to the nuts and bolts. What we're going to quickly cover with you are 4 basic topics associated with our proposal. We're going to give you a handful of slides talking about the basic nature of the problem and why we think it is such an important problem. Then we're going to talk about why we think our QEP proposal is a good proposed solution to the problem, and then talk about a few brass tacks for your benefit. First of all, the nature of the problem. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on these slides, mainly because most of the people in this room and most of the people that will be watching this presentation don't need persuading on the point. We know that college students all across the United States could be and should be stronger in their reading comprehension and reading proficiency. The 2022 report out of ACT regarding the results from the 2022 administration of the ACT show that basically the gist at the bottom of the screen is the following. 75% means you're pretty confident, right? It's quite likely. We believe, the test results suggest that we feel that it's quite likely that 40% of our students across the United States would get a C or better in courses that relate to reading and writing. But we can only say that about 41% of the students. The other 60% of the students, we don't have that level of confidence that they'd get a C or better in a course that was focused on reading and writing and related topics. Here's another piece of data that my colleague Paul Kinsley managed to locate.
Hi, everyone. So I can agree with my colleague here that I arrived at the idea for this QEP from personal experience, from anecdotal experience as somebody teaching English classes here at UHD. Over the past number of years, I noticed this interesting trend. It seemed as though students were not grasping as much out of their reading assignments as I had been expecting or had been used to. And especially in the past few years, I noticed that students would try to somehow bypass purchasing the books for the class altogether. And try to cobble together something from the internet or whatever on their phones and try to kind of do the reading for the class that way. And these are English classes where presumably you're expecting, you're going to get a self-selected group of students, the kind of self-appointed bookworms who are going to come into class wanting to read and read a lot. And even there, it's been a bit of a struggle. So that's how I arrived at this. And yeah, I noticed that my individual anecdotal experience was something that is shared widely across the university. So one of the places that I looked in terms of trying to contextualize our proposal was the national data. Paul found the ACT. This is the SAT. Just a reminder, in 2017, the SAT combined the reading and writing scores. They used to be separate tests and separate scores. From 2017 forward, it's a singular score, the verbal part of the SAT, but you can see, a downward trend. If you see that bump from about, 2003 to about 2007, my entirely speculative theory is that's the Harry Potter bump. These are all of the students in grade school that, that read those books. My daughter was one of them, and they became more proficient readers than otherwise, right? And also at the bottom there, right? The iPhone was introduced in 2007. I don't think that's, an accident, that was part of the effect of these declining scores in reading. Okay, so now locally, right? Because we're supposed to add in our kind of local situation here. It doesn't really differ from the national one in terms of the kind of the overall picture. But here's looking at our gateway English composition course, English 1301. These are ABC rates from 2018 to 2023. Looking at the fall semester, that's when the FTSE cohort's coming in and we get the major data point from that semester. And you can see prior to the pandemic, right, we were at about 75, 72% of students making an A, B, or C. Just a note, right, if a student gets a D, they have to retake 1301 because we regard that as an important milestone for achieving college level proficiency in writing. Then there's the big dip. That was when the program went online because of COVID and so on. We came back and now have a mostly in-person writing program, again, freshman writing program. But you can see we haven't really achieved, the initial scores. And even before the pandemic, right, 75% getting an A, B, or C in such an important class, that's, leaves a lot of room for improvement as well. So that is sort of the data that contextualizes our proposal. Okay, over to Paul.
Yeah. And then what you see on this slide will come as a surprise to no one in this audience, and probably to no one who's watching the video recording at home. Reading is critical in lots of different ways to success, both at the office and at home. We know that reading helps us to develop our communication skills. When we step into the shoes of other souls, it strengthens our empathy. We know that it develops critical thinking and problem-solving skills. Readers are constantly being challenged to adapt. The more people read, the more they are challenged to adapt to other perspectives, other viewpoints. That washes over into their personal lives. And finally, because they are exposed to so many different ideas, they bring more to the table when we ask people to think outside the box. And we want to be very clear about what we're trying to shoot for here, just as a quick final comment. We are really shooting for moonshot type impact as far as reading is concerned. We talked about possible taglines, and one tagline we played with was, we read one book a month. We aspire to reading one good book a week. That's the aspiration. Not a book a month, a book a week. And so I want you to think about how much tennis would you have to substitute out? How much TV? No more Friends reruns. How many different things are you going to have to substitute out in order to bring reading into your life and to be able to truthfully describe yourself as a voracious reader? That's what we're shooting for. Let me see here. Next slide. There's the advance. Oh, yes, Paul.
So just to kind of bring in some voices from elsewhere in the academy and across the country, just to kind of, again, there's just a Google search on my part to kind of see what kind of things are being said recently. And you can see This Adam Kotsko article from Slate got a bit of play on social media, it seemed, in the early part of this year. Again, not a message that I think is unfamiliar to any of us, but it's true. In my writing classes and in my English classes, if I'm going to ask students to read more than 30 pages, I had a thought, I should go back and look at my syllabus from like 20 years ago and see, how much reading I was expecting. And, I'm pretty sure what, my base level expectation is now compared to 20 years ago. It's less, right? Also, this one's a really depressing one down here, right? Teresa Dolan, an assistant professor of English at Los Angeles Trade Technical College, wrote in to say that she has seen an alarming decline in reading skills over her 20th years at the college. As a result, she no longer assigns books. And, there's a kind of a technological sort of driver behind a lot of this. The act of reading has physically and technologically changed over the past 20, 30 years. People will read on devices. They will read on computer screens. I wonder if there's of course great advantages to be had in those digital conveniences, but in my humble opinion, they shouldn't be crowding out the physical books altogether. For example, I found one article that said, in a survey of students, 87% of survey students said they would prefer to read course assignments in print. And I would ask you maybe to reflect on your own reading habits. In fact, here I am printing out the slides that I'm showing you up there, right? Just because it's somehow more real to me. So there, I'm proving my own thesis. And down there, a new Stanford study shows that reading skills among young students stalled during the pandemic, right? And so that whole cohort that were really affected at that basic level are now starting to filter through, the kind of the K through 12 system, and they will eventually reach our doorstep, and we'll have another challenge on our hands as well. Okay, back over to Paul.
And so the question that's being presented when we were putting this slide together, one thing that we talked about was, I don't know how many of you heard this, the average age of an undergraduate student at the University of Texas at Austin, 20. The average age of an undergraduate student at Texas A&M University, College Station, 20. The average age of an undergraduate student at UHD, 28. Our students are older, they are more experienced, they are more sophisticated. They are at, not all of them, but a substantial percentage of them are. And they have a momentum established to their lives. They have commitments. They have outside activities. And so one way to think about the nature of this problem is to think that what we're trying to do is we're trying to convert adult non-readers into adult readers. That's arguably what we're trying to do. And many of our students are the first people in their family to go to college. So many of them have not had a role model in their life who was a voracious reader, who read all of the time. So they're coming into this, many of them without a strong role model in terms of an avid reader. And then they also have a lot of momentum to their lives. And so the question that we were asking ourselves was, when we run into people who took up reading later in life, what motivated them to do so? And we came up with 5 examples. Personal interest or curiosity, they were turned on by some kind of an interesting topic. Number 2, educational or professional goals. They began reading about topics that they thought could advance their career. Social or cultural influences, many of them were affected because they had an intimate experience with an avid reader. They went to a book club. They went to a presentation by an author. They were in a room with only 15 or 20 or 30 other people, and they were affected by that experience. And suddenly they turned over a leaf and decided to become avid readers. Escape or entertainment, hey, let's admit it, reading can be a great escape. I could assign Moby Dick, I could assign Macbeth, but I think what for many young people, they would find Into Thin Air. Again, all 3 about ambition, but this just in a more contemporary context. And then finally, personal growth. Many people take up reading and become avid readers because they want to talk about relationships, the things in their lives and in their relationships that are working or not. And what's our proposal? Our proposal is to press all 5 of those buttons. That's what we want to do. And that includes the entertainment button. We want to press all 5 buttons. Many of y'all saw Mr. Holland's Opus, the famous movie about the guy who becomes a teacher of music. And he said, I will do anything to help a student to fall in love with music. That is exactly our attitude regarding reading. We want to do anything we can to get them to spending more of their time at reading. And so we have proposed a suite of book clubs and events, inspirational speakers and leaders, and we want our professors to be able to push back the frontiers of our knowledge about higher education by doing studies on what works and what doesn't in terms of trying to get people to read more. These are examples of some of the activities that we proposed. Book Club Underground, fiction, read to lead, nonfiction books of all kinds, including things about career, wellness, life management, etc. Newsroom, a club that meets and talks about a recent high visibility article, perhaps in the Houston Chronicle or another major newspaper, talks about the strengths and weaknesses, critically evaluates the strengths and weaknesses of the reporting, helping our students to become critical readers, not just believe it because it happens to be in print. Watson, in our wonderful Writing and Reading Center, they already have a program where students mentor and help each other to develop. We'd like to partner with that program, possibly rebrand it, which is where the name Watson comes from. We'd like UHD faculty members and friends of UHD, industry partners. We'd like to invite them to come in and talk about their experiences on their projects, their research initiatives, their industry efforts, and how reading and critically thinking played a key role. Readability, we want to provide extra resources to the Writing and Reading Center to help students to develop their critical reading skills. And then as indicated below, we want our professors, we want our faculty to treat this as a research project. And so that's the final component. This is, now we're in the weeds. This does align with many of UHD's most important strategic goals. We won't go into the details there. We also have a couple of bullets for the folks who are crazy about assessment. We wanted to talk about a variety of ways you could gather data, gather metrics, and show the impact that these programs are having. And then I think I'm going to leave it to Paul to make closing comments about the program, and then we'll invite any questions that you might have.
Okay, I'll keep this brief because I guess we're going to go outside and stare at the clouds and imagine the eclipse that is occurring behind them. Okay, so yeah, I guess the top part of that is something we've already gone over, right? It's ultimately what we're going after is kind of changing the sort of day-to-day behavior of our students when it comes to reading. In my view and in my experience, reading is something you should be doing all the time, not just passively and in reaction to a college assignment. And that kind of transformation from, a passive reader who responds to assignments and syllabi, right, to an active reader who, of course, does all that, but then moves on and uses their library card and checks out books from the library and buys things, at half-price books and, becomes a kind of they're an investigator all on their own, right? And following their own curiosity. That's kind of what we're after. And one might argue that our students are already doing a lot of reading, right? They're scrolling endlessly through comments on TikTok. They're scrolling endlessly through comments on Facebook and Twitter and whatnot, right? But those are tiny little snippets that they're reading over and over again, right? So it's like it's a negative reinforcement loop, right? That's kind of producing smaller and smaller attention spans. And what we're after, of course, is sustained and meaningful reading, and that it's got to link up in some way with what students want, right? Because just making this into more homework for students, that won't work, right? So, and this is where we're going to have to rely on the ingenuity and passion of all of our faculty to come up with great ideas and great proposals. This is just a draft of things that we can do that will move the needle meaningfully on student reading performance. And I think that is about it. But the last point here, right? I said, reading is not an isolated activity. Of course, you have to read in an isolated way, or you can. Ultimately, though, what makes it meaningful is the social aspect of it. When you read and then discuss what you've read with others, or read in a group, right? So we wanted to put a kind of strong emphasis on that social aspect of reading, and how that act of reading can build a community and make a more meaningful kind of cohort experience for our students. Okay, I think I'll leave it right there. If Paul wants to say a last word.
No, actually, and just keep your feet right here. We're opening it up now for Q&A. So any questions, comments of any sort from anyone? And Emily, how are we doing on the eclipse? Okay, all right. Any questions of any sort, please? Yes, ma'am. So I absolutely was about to do that. So for the benefit of the folks who are watching the recording at home, the question was, well, when I look around me, I don't see an incredibly high percentage of readers in the population at large. And then if we look at our student population here at UHD, how is it exactly you expect to motivate them to participate in these kinds of activities? It's probably a relatively small percentage of students who participate in university activities of any kind. And now what you're proposing is something that's slightly more exciting than take your vitamins and eat your vegetables. You're saying, hey, why don't you join us and let's all read together? And I think it's an extremely fair point. And what I just flashed up is a slide that's in the supplemental materials of the PowerPoint. The very first phase of this project is the design phase. And what we're going to be needing is to tap into all of the collective insights that we've got inside our faculty to make that happen. If there is a group on Earth that can do this, it's our faculty here. We have people who spend 15 weeks with groups of 30 to 40 students, all discovering different tools to excite and motivate and inspire them. And we'll do some shameless things. We'll get some celebrities, we'll get people, who add some sex appeal to some of the early events. But we also are going to be trying to work very, very hard to pick topics that we believe will motivate the students and that will put people in the seats. And we're gonna again, the reason for so much time on the front end is a lot of people just don't realize how consequential this is. I use the example of reading a book a week. The first person who reached out to me and inspired me, I strive for that in my own life. I'm still not there, but I'm getting closer every year, was the general counsel at Microsoft. He and I were thrown together on a project, and he told me, how much do you read? And I told him, and he said, I try to read a quality book every week. And it's difficult, but it's changed my life. You know who else has said that? Warren Buffett, the financial investor, Bill Gates, Zuckerberg at Facebook. All of these individuals, Oprah, all of them have said they spend a substantial amount of time reading on their own curated book list, and they believe it is an enormous reason for the success that they've experienced in their personal and professional lives. So we think sharing those kinds of experiences and tapping into the collective wisdom of the faculty, it's a moonshot. We're going to be completely candid about it. It's a moonshot, but we think it's a worthy moonshot. And so we are filled with hope. Yes. I'm going to make a quick comment and then I'll invite Paul to do the same. Again, and I think, I wish I'd said it first. Paul said it beautifully. The critical thing is for this to not be framed as more homework. The critical thing for us to get across is we are not saying you should read because, again, it's like eating your vegetables. We are saying you should read more for two reasons. Number one, it's incredibly enjoyable and life-changing, and you will want to talk to the people around you, to your colleagues at work, to your boss about the things that you're reading. And then secondly, it is positively correlated with all the things you want in your life. You want the house on the hill. You want a great relationship with your significant other. You want you want a wonderful relationship with your kids. You want to change the world, change the community in which you reside. Reading purposefully, choosing the books that you believe are going to move the needle in your life is one of the keys to doing that. So it's a joyous thing, and it's a thing that contributes to your success in life. Paul?
Yeah, it's a good question. As we know, right, our students, in fact, you know what? I'll tell you a story. The first question I got at UHD, it was the fall of 2005, and I was walking into my very first English classroom. It was sophomore lit. And I handed out the syllabus. The first question was, are we going to read all of these books? So that was my introduction to the busy lives of our students. So I'm well aware. I would also say that I'm well aware of how much time our students spend on their phones. And I suspect that if we just traded out 50% of the time on their phones for 50% of quality reading, we would solve the problem. So it's a question then, right, of finding ways to kind of to cause that change and to kind of create structures of, uplifting social connection that will make that students want to read more and not just feel that they have to and turn the phone off.
Yeah, and a follow-up, the average person spends 6 hours a week on their phone. That's the average person spends 6 hours a week on their phone. Yeah, yes, Dr. Quander. That's another interesting aspect that would tie into the design of the program. We don't believe that the university really would have to subsidize the direct costs that the students experience associated with the program. But I just want to share with you, every faculty member we talk to, without exception, says, wouldn't it be wonderful if the university could help? Doesn't mean the university has to buy the entire book, but if there was some way that the university could help with that expense, and that's an intriguing proposal, but obviously it has enormous budgetary ramifications. It would just be something that we would have to investigate. But again, you talk to the average student who spends $20 on Pepsi and pizza, on a Friday night, and watches a movie, a 2-hour movie. You get a quality book, and it provides satisfaction for if they don't do one a week, they do one a month. It gives satisfaction for a month. My kids, you referred to the Harry Potter effect. Did you notice the books got longer? I'll never forget the day we were in Barnes and Noble, and they got their hands on book 4, and it was huge. And my youngest, Mark, looked at it and said, "Oh man, look at it. It's 600 pages. This is going to have so many good stories in it, And the length was this enormous positive, because the experience was going to be longer and richer and full of more adventures. That's the mindset that we're looking to inspire. Any other questions?
There's one more quick one online. Addressing the fact that we are an Hispanic serving institution and making reading choices that cross cultural boundaries.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it reminds me, at our event last week, somebody came up and said, aren't we already doing this? And my answer was, well, in a way we are, but the idea of quality enhancement is that we could do more and be more mindful and more intentional and do it better and have a greater impact than what we are already doing, because we can put resources behind things. And I know that across the university, there's been a great move towards giving our students the kinds of intellectual experiences that reflect back to them who they are and meets them where they are. Yes, I think that would be something that would be guiding our steps as we go along this path, if we choose this QEP, to make sure that we're giving students, a mixture, right, of things distant and, kind of remote, and things that are near and dear and intimate, right? I think that's, from my sake, right, reading for me was a way to go far away and travel far away. And not only read about the things that were, most immediate to my own experience. So I think, it would be a blend of those things. But that's my answer. Okay.
Yeah, and I think UHD has a lot to be proud of in that regard. I think when I first arrived here in 2017, oh, by the way, I introduced my colleagues. My name is Paul Fulbright. I'm an assistant professor in the College of Business. When I arrived here in 2017 for the very first time, I did a little poking around on this topic. And at a time in the past, I don't think it's still existent, but we had UHD Reads One Book. And one of our last selections in that program was American Like Me, which was a collection of essays from people from a whole host of cultures talking about what it's like to be an American who is not a white adult male, right? Okay, from all of the other traditions. That was our UHD Reads One Book selection. So I think if ever there's an example of a program where we would absolutely tap into all of the different voices that are around us, it would be this one. I think we're out of time. Thank you very, very much for your attention.
We're going to get started with our QEP topic proposal 2. I want to first thank our topic proposal authors, Paul and Paul team. A big round of applause for them. Great job. Now I would like to call to the podium Dean Burns Ardilino and Poonam Gulati. Dean Burns Ardilino.
Good afternoon. And I do want to say that this proposal has emerged from years of analysis, but also from talking with colleagues and consultation with peers, which I think is always a great place to start a QEP process. So I want to thank all of the members of the QEP steering committee and thank the provost for appointing me to the committee, because I definitely think that I benefited from the shared and collective wisdom of all the folks on the committee as well. So any mistakes here are mine, and anything that I've gotten right are the result of that consultation. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I've been thinking about this for a long time because kind of like Paul Kinsley, I've been in higher ed for a long time, and I've had an opportunity to observe student success in college, but also as they make the leap to their careers and through internships and other experiences. So I wanted to focus today on transferable skills because I do think that's critically important, especially as we kind of respond to what Commissioner Harrison Keller said when he was here visiting us from the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, that regional comprehensive institutions are the tip of the spear in terms of talent development. And so really that's where this is coming from. And I do want to read this because I just think it's really something I've thought about for a long time. By strengthening career readiness and professional skills in all UHD degree programs, we will accelerate talent development to drive socioeconomic mobility for a just and sustainable future. And in thinking about student-focused skills for impact-driven careers, I believe it is critical that our students are prepared to transfer academic knowledge and skills into meaningful and impact-driven careers. Students need a strong grounding in their professional fields, as well as critical human skills such as teamwork, empathy, integrity, and interpersonal communication. They need the opportunity to engage in the application of academic learning in areas such as presentation skills, critical thinking, reading, writing, analytical skills, mathematics and scientific principles, and quantitative and qualitative methods. And additional skills such as organization, time management, problem solving, prioritization, and decision making are paramount in our professional workplace environments. So what this proposal really looks at is our students' success as they are bridging from their academic careers into their talent-focused careers or their major careers. And so what I really wanted to focus on today is talking about how we would do that. But I do, Poonam was really gracious and consulted with our Career Center folks. And there is data from our Destination First survey to suggest that in the majors where there is more focus on career readiness and professional skills development, our students' job placement post-graduation is much higher. And so we certainly know that we have programs that already do focus on transferable skills and professional skills, but it is not widespread across the entire university. So that's really what this proposal is about. Transferring those skills and having them translate from the academic environment into the workplace in some of the areas that I mentioned previously. Also thinking about professional skills and where they are learned in the degree plans and in the program, where those high impact experiences are situated in the programs, where there's space for those. And again, guaranteeing that every student has the opportunity in the program to do that built into the degree plan. So really looking at examples would be in high impact experiences, like field experiences and internships, and then also service learning, which I think are very common experiences for our students to have, although again, emphasized more in some programs than others and built in as required or focused or emphasized in some programs more than others. But there are lots of ideas. And as I was talking to some of the folks at the roundtables at the re-accreditation kickoff or reaffirmation kickoff, some ideas arose from the folks around the table. For example, pitch competitions, professional elevator pitches. So that would be like when you ask a student, okay, what have you learned in your program and how would you like to apply that in your selected career field? These are things that our students should be able to rattle off in an elevator if needed. And I think it's great to think about how to articulate those skills that students are gleaning from our major programs. Because again, as Paul Squared pointed out, we have fabulous programs led by amazing faculty who I know build lots of learning into the program. So having places in our programs where our students get to try that out and where they get to articulate that back is very meaningful. Other examples include like professional presentations and mock interviews. And as I said, I think Hossein is in the room, so I'm going to say I got this from Hossein. And there are even more examples that our faculty would want to incorporate into their degree programs. So thank you for that, asking that question at our roundtable. Also, when we're thinking about how does this align with our existing strategic plan, these things are already built into our goals and objectives. And I have the A and B and C are the goals, but then the numbers 4, 3 and 4, and 3B are objectives. But I do want to read the goals because I think they kind of give you the umbrella effect of where those objectives occur in our strategic plan. And this is to say, for those of you who are watching remotely, that in particular, these goals are already built into the plan, but then also these objectives are already built into the plan. So we need to find a way to reach these objectives, regardless of whether or not this QEP is selected. So I still think doing this presentation is very meaningful for me personally, and hopefully for all of you, because you can think about the ways in which your degree plans and your programs would fulfill these objectives as part of the larger goals for the strategic plan. So goal A, you may recall, is enhance the student experience to increase retention and graduation rates and enable students to learn and grow in all aspects. The particular objective that applies to this QEP proposal is increase number of graduates who are gainfully employed or enrolled in advanced studies within the range of 6 months to 1 year of graduation. Goal B, you might recall, is to cultivate a diverse portfolio of strategic learning partnerships to promote experiential learning. So again, experiential learning is a key component of how we envision our students succeeding at UHD and beyond. And so number 3 and 4, focused on graduate and undergraduate students, are increase the number of credit-bearing and non-credit-bearing internships for undergraduate and graduate students. So again, there are 2 specific benchmarks there, both credit-bearing or non-credit-bearing for our graduate and undergraduate students. And then goal C focuses on cultivating a dynamic learning environment where we nurture our students to their fullest potential so that they may better impact their world. And 3B, which is the objective, specifies increase and maintain the proportion of students who say their postgraduate employment is in a position in which they apply the skills and knowledge from their major. So what this QEP is really calling for is both a deepening of the professional skills development in the programs, and also an inclusion of the transferability of not only those professional skills, but also of the skills that are needed in the workplace, whether those are human skills or more particular to critical skills like presentation skills. So the way in which those might be taken up by different majors or different programs by the faculty who design those degree plans is really up to those faculty. But as I said to Hossein, I think really the sky is the limit when we invite our faculty to re-envision what is possible in terms of mapping those transferable skills and professional skills onto their degree plans. So this is kind of where the rubber meets the road here. What this proposal is actually calling for is the intentional mapping of field-specific professional skills, career readiness skills, and human skills onto our degree programs. And really the goal here is to offer our students a blueprint for accelerating their own talent development, which again is in alignment with our mission as a regional comprehensive institution, but also is very close to our hearts as at UHD, as we know we serve a lot of students who are first in their family to go to college, and who by their own success, not only at our institution, but in their professional careers, have an opportunity to raise the socioeconomic standing of their families and give other opportunities to both community members and their families. So phase 1 actually calls for the invitation for our degree program faculty to re-envision transferable skills into all degree programs. And then I specified here a minimum of 3 to 5 career readiness or professional skills components, but of course it would ultimately be up to the faculty how robust they want to get. And I think we could certainly have a sliding scale in terms of where programs are starting from, because we may have programs that are deeper into this than other programs. And I think that's a great way to start, having the folks that have been doing it for a long time, enhancing and increasing their transferable skills and professional skills, but also being models for some opportunities and some options for some programs that maybe haven't mapped those skills into their degree plans and maps. And then phase 2 would be mapping each component into all degree plans. I'm sorry, I see there's a typo here. I think I fixed it on one version, but it showed up in this version like this. But the word may here means map. Map each component into all degree plans and degree maps. And then phase 3 would be continue our strategic plan data collection, right, in those goals A, B, and C, and in those specific objectives that I referenced. So in some ways, we already have this built into our university assessment in our strategic plan. But I think leaving space for the degree maps and the curriculum maps at the unit level or the departmental level to make sure that we are achieving those benchmarks that we can use for our strategic plan goals is really important as well. And at that point, I'm just going to conclude here. And I know Poonam said she would join me for questions because, as you know, she is our director of the High Impact Learning Office. So thank you very much.
I have sort of a comment and a question. The comment is it's a spectacular presentation. I love every aspect of it. The question is, what I really loved in particular about it was you didn't just refer to the field-specific professional skills and the career readiness skills, but you also referred to human skills as well. So often in the public forum, in newspaper articles, to listen to comments from various commentators, the only reason for a college degree is to get a job. I mean, that's just in the drinking water in many forums out there. And we know that what we're trying to do is to create lifelong learners. We certainly want them to be successful at work, but we want them to be successful in all aspects of their lives. And I noticed that y'all specifically called out human skills, not just field-specific professional and career readiness. Could you talk just a little bit about the kinds of skills that fit in those 3 buckets and specifically talk a little bit about the human skills component as well? I just wanted to hear a little bit more about that.
I'll do the human skills. You want to do the other two? So in terms of the human skills, that terminology, by the way, I want to credit. I was previously a department chair at Grand Valley State University for the Department of Liberal Studies in the Brooks College of Interdisciplinary Studies. And we were very closely aligned with AAC&U value rubrics in terms of our learning outcomes. And I heard that term for the first time at an AAC&U conference, which was actually a general education conference. But I have liked it. I have held on to it, and I've liked it because I have to say, and everyone knows that I'm an administrator, right? So in administration, the number one skill that I use every single day is human skills. Yeah, I am a good writer. I'm a good email responder, but it's about how you interact and engage with humans. And I have to say, like in terms of team building, in terms of leadership, in terms of guidance, in terms of mentoring, in terms of facilitating and supporting, those are the things that, quite frankly, my career path never trained me to do. However, the kind of work that I've sought to do inside of the academy has been very people focused. And that stems from everything from advising students which is where I learned that students need a blueprint for success whenever they come to your office. It doesn't matter what they come to your office for. You need to contextualize what they're asking for in the broader sense of their success. And that's what we all need to do every single day that we interact with our students. We need to validate what they're asking for, but then contextualize it in terms of how that makes a blueprint for success. And to me, that's human skills in operation. And I would say the same is true for our personnel in terms of our staff and in terms of our faculty. And I'll be the first person to say sometimes I make mistakes because I talk a lot, and I talk really fast and I think really fast. But the reality is how you engage with other humans. It really does impact how successful you're going to be in your career field, especially if you're in a management or leadership position. So over to you, Poonam.
Thank you, Wendy. And I think a lot of the skills that Wendy mentioned could also be put into other buckets. But the first thing, of course, that we want to do is give them a strong education in whatever field they've chosen. And I think we do that really well. But the second thing is, can they use that information to solve problems? And so I tell my students, nobody's going to hire you to recite the periodic table, but they're going to assume you know these things and then that you can apply that knowledge to understand, first of all, just understand what the issues are, and then once you understand them, to figure out what the solutions would be. So something like a service learning course does that. So they're learning in the classroom, and then they go out into the community. And first of all, I think they gain empathy also just to understand what the issues are, which would be a human skill. And then they figure out, okay, this is an issue. I understand it because I learned this in the classroom. And then what kind of solution would I propose? And that, their critical thinking skills are required for both those things, both to understand what's going on and then also to figure out how to solve that issue. And then if you think about things like internships, it's really important for them to get that experience, right? One, to figure out, I love it or I hate it, I don't want to do this again, but also to figure out how do you behave in a situation like that? How do you interact with people that are there? How do you work in a team? How do you think critically? How can you communicate? Wendy talked about emails. A lot of our students don't really know how to write an email. They don't know how to address the person that they're writing their email to. And so there's that type of skill. There's oral communication, there's written communication, and also being able to market yourself. So there's that skill that they need to have as well. Like, yes, I have these experiences, A, B, C, D, but then how do I use that to make myself a better candidate for a particular position? And I think our students need all of those skills. So not just what they learn in the classroom, but how can you use that to then develop your other skills that you need to be a strong candidate in the marketplace. So that's what we were thinking.
So as I mentioned earlier, so I'm a great proponent of service learning or internship kind of programs, but unfortunately those takes more than 3 hours a week to do. And that's a lot of time commitment, but more importantly, commitment that takes away from a lot of our students' opportunity to bring income because they support their families. So, I think we have a good deal of unpaid internship available, but that doesn't work for a lot of our students. So what, if anything, we can do to try to provide opportunity, a real opportunity where people can go spend the time, the 10 hours, 20 hours a week that they need to go do the internship and the service learning without having to give up on being the breadwinner for their families.
Okay, I can start. Yes, that is definitely one of the biggest problems that we have. We're asking students, even for a field experience course, we're asking them to give up some hours in their paid job and then actually pay to take a field experience course and then not get paid to do that field experience. That is definitely a big issue. And one of the biggest things that my office is constantly looking for is funding for internship programs. There's not a lot out there, but we're trying. And I think students all across the university, so we surveyed we sent the survey to every student, and in every department, in every program, students picked internships as what they want to do. And anywhere that we go present, all the questions that we get asked is about internship. How can I get an internship? And I have to commend the College of Business because they really push internships, right? Whether they're paid or not. Now, there are a lot more paid internships on the business side than there are on the other side. But I think there's also something called micro internships now, where you can spend like a week or so, and doesn't have to be necessarily continuous week. Maybe just come for 3 hours a week, and you can shadow somebody and learn about what's going on. We've talked about actually doing that here at UHD and asking folks across the university, what kind of experience can you provide our students? And so that is something that's in the works. I know College of Business is already doing some micro internships. There are some employers that are willing to do that. It's a start, but I agree with you, Hossein. What we really need is funding for our internships, for our interns.
So it may be possible as part of this QEP proposal, because there are resources typically from institutions for their QEP, for us to defray some costs for some paid internships. I know, again, when I was at Grand Valley State University, we had some funds that were available for students to apply for internal funds to be paid for internships so that they could, defray some of their personal costs from not being able to work at their day job or whatever. So that might be an option for a QEP. We have not heard yet what the financial contributions of the institution are going to be, but that might be a good way for us to use funds for this program.
So QEP rises from the need of the institution. We already have a lot of the buckets of the skills that you were talking about embedded into our existing programming. And how have you, when you started thinking about this topic proposal, did you think about what are we doing right now that's not sufficient? And if we go this route, what are we doing additional to take that from 1 to 1+, so that we have a baseline, and then we're taking that from baseline, because some of these internship and other team building opportunities, they are embedded in certain courses, or these skills, transferable skills, the 3 buckets are embedded in certain programs and courses already, right? And experiences. So we have UHD at this level, and we want to take the UHD from this level to this level. So please speak more about that, so that I have a better understanding.
So it's a good question, because I think the high level answer is that we would be asking all degree programs across the entire university to be in compliance with this goal, whether it is 3 or 5 components of professional and transferable skills, that those would be built into the program experience for every single student in their degrees. So whatever degree program a student is in, they would not graduate from that degree program until they have 3 to 5 experiences, which would be up to the faculty, the program faculty, to build that into their degree plans and to map that into their degree programs and guarantee that experience for every single student in their degree plans. So it would look different in the sense that what those applied experiences or hands-on experiences are, or what those opportunities are, might vary in terms of emphasis from program to program. But nonetheless, every single student who enters into a degree plan during this QEP would be guaranteed that experience as part of their degree plans. And I think where does that end? When I said the sky is the limit, I think once people have that, once we build that into our degree plans and we see the success that our students have in terms of retaining them through to graduation and their successful career placement, that it will become something that we want to continue to accelerate. And I think we could build that into our individual plans on an annual basis as well. Thanks.
I think also, just to answer your question, there really aren't that many programs that have a lot of these types of courses that are offered. So for example, internships or actually field experience, if it's curricular, it's only in a couple of programs, 2 or 3 programs that it's mandatory for a student. And service learning, even though we've increased our numbers significantly, we are still less than 10%. We're hovering around 7-8%. I think nationally the number is about 15% of courses are designated as service learning. So, and definitely it's concentrated in certain areas. So I think that's something that we really want to do, is to try to persuade faculty to insert these types of experiences into the curriculum so students basically fall into those classes. So, and actually we did this comparison or correlation between taking high impact courses or experiences with graduation rates. And we looked at one of the cohorts, and it's very strong positive correlation that if you are like at about 2 high impact experiences, the graduation rate is in the mid 50% range. If you're at 3 or 4, which the numbers are lower, right? At 3 and 4, they're very low numbers, but you reach like 78% and then 100% at 4. Are we good? Thank you.
Our next presentation, this is our 3rd QEP topic, Better Through Belonging. So come on up, you guys. We have Travis Crone and Jerry Johnson.
Hi, everybody. First off, a couple things about our proposal. First, it is the most abstract of the 3 proposals. It is a gigantic idea. And part of the process, if we were to move forward with this, we need to narrow it down. We need to pick out some specific things we want to do. So today, what I want to do is talk about what we want to do, give you some ideas about what's been done in other places and some of the impacts that we've seen. For this QEP, it's a little different than the other ones that you've seen, because what we're suggesting is tackling a psychological concept to look at the downstream impacts of changing that psychological construct here, which is belonging. What is belonging? I'm going to just quote Jeffrey Cohen. He's a social psychologist that has wrote the book on this in many ways. Feeling that we are part of a larger group that values, respects, and cares for us, and to which we have something to contribute. Belonging is something that we as humans fundamentally need. And when our feelings of belongingness are thwarted, there are pretty stark psychological contrasts. Our concepts get shifted. A common example that probably everyone in the room has experienced is the idea of imposter syndrome. That moment where you feel like you don't fit in with the group, they're going to figure out you don't fit in with the group, and then there are going to be outcomes from that. And whether that was real or not, it probably wasn't real. It felt very real to you. And you shifted your behavior in the moment, you've shifted how you thought about yourself, and you shifted how you reacted to other people. So what we see in the literature is that a sense of belonging contributes to long-term resiliency. We see enhanced coping behaviors, and the ability to be the authentic self in different situations. An aspect of belonging that doesn't always get addressed is that you are accepted as you are. There's no need for you to assimilate to the current culture or climate that you're in. Instead, the current culture and climate is accepting you as you are. Now, belonging uncertainty, and I'll say when belongingness is thwarted as well, that's the phrasing I usually use. It has been linked to lower levels of motivation in students. We've seen lower academic performance, and we see reduced persistence. So as we move forward, some of the outcome variables that we are interested in, or we think that this could tackle, are issues with retention, DFW rates, and graduation rates. Now, belonging is a gigantic construct, and people who tell you it's one thing are lying to you or trying to sell you something. So there are a bunch of different types of belonging, depending on the situations you're in. And here I've just highlighted 3 that I think could interface with UHD. One is academic belonging, the idea that you belong in college. Many of our students probably have lower levels of this due to their high school performance, due to the families they come from. If they are first-gen students, they almost certainly are going to struggle with this. There's also community belonging, the idea that you belong here, not just in college, but you belong at UHD. And I will say, I think that we do a pretty good job of this middle one, that you belong at UHD. And the last one, with which you're going to hear flavors of what Dean Burns-Ardolino was talking about here, is professional belonging, the idea that you belong in your field. And if I was going to suggest we move in one direction, this would be the type of belonging I think that we could really tackle and move the needle with. That our students, making sure they can see themselves in the careers that they want to do. So why could belonging matter to our students? So here are some things that we see in the literature that when they've done belongingness interventions, they've seen outcomes. Now, this is looking at a large band of psychological and other types of research, and not everything hits every time. But what we see is that we see increased well-being in students after their belongingness has been increased. We see decreased levels of loneliness, protection against risk factors, risky behaviors. This is particularly true with teenagers or younger individuals. Lower levels of drug usage, lower levels of violent behaviors, lower levels of basically any teen angsty thing you don't want to see. We see decreased levels of suicidality, which is a really important one right now. We had the mental health summit last week that we learned a lot about that. And then we do tend to see better academic performance. This does not hit in every study all the time, but on the whole, we see academic performance increase. Now, one of the reasons I think that this can be really important here at UHD is because students from marginalized groups and first-generation students tend to have the most powerful impacts here. First, they tend to show the lowest levels of belonging and show the most negative impacts of belonging uncertainty. And when they've done different randomized controlled type trials, a good true experiment, what they found is that these marginalized groups are often the ones that get the most powerful benefits. And some of the studies, the marginalized groups are the ones that do get the benefit. And we see them start to get to that level of the majority group. Now, I'll save that for you. I'll let you talk about that. Just really quickly, a couple ways that belongingness has been tackled in the literature, and I do not want you to hear today that these are the things that we would need to do. These are just ideas that have been done out there that we could start as a springboard. One of the top ones is peer mentoring and good true peer mentoring. And one of the number one things that this does is it normalizes obstacles and it normalizes failure. One of the things that I see in the classroom, and I imagine most of you do as well, is our students will tackle something and maybe they didn't do great, maybe they failed that first test, and they stop. Any resistance is maximum resistance. And what we found is that when we can normalize obstacles, when we can normalize that things are hard sometimes, things take effort sometimes, and they realize that it's not just hard for them, but it's hard for everyone, they persist more. And we see increased levels of persistence, increased levels of trying, and tend to see better academic outcomes because of that. A common thing that we see when universities or communities are trying to tackle belongingness at the university level is the creation of student organizations that are focused on particular identity groups. Now, that's not going to be popular to hear for some people right now in Texas, but the creation of groups that say you belong here, you're valued here, your identity is important to us. You're good. Another thing that you heard in some of the other ones is the expanding of field experience courses. This actually is really important, where students are going out and they're having field internships and field experiences and internships in their profession to show themselves that they can do it and they can meet more models of people already doing it. In the classroom, through the syllabus, you could use things like identity safety cues. It's not just on the syllabus, but it's a key, things like usage of pronouns, diversity statements, faculty upfront saying, I refer to people by their preferred name. These little things can be very powerful for students who are having trouble seeing themselves in the class. They feel accepted, they start to feel safe early on. We have identity-targeted programming. This is the idea that different groups bring in different identities and it's value added. And it's not just about homogenizing everybody into one particular thing, but that their identity, who they are, is important and it's crucial to our community. Seeing themselves in the course material, this is a pretty easy thing that faculty can do in their classes. It's as simple as changing PowerPoint pictures to make sure that it's not just white men every time, that they can see themselves as simple, as silly but powerful, changing examples to make sure that you're using different genders, you're using different names that may imply different ethnic backgrounds, little simple things like that, showing that it's not just one singular perspective. And then in the way we talk to our students through like official communications, that can matter too. I think it was out of Stanford a couple years ago. They shifted the way they wrote their probation letters. And they had their probation letter come with a quote from a student that had been on probation, but then got off probation. And it showed that you could do it. And they had a significant positive experience from that. I'm gonna invite Dr. Johnson to talk about some of the implications.
Thanks. And I think Dr. Crone did a really good job of framing this and providing some real low threshold mechanisms that we can engage our students with this. But I also want to take a moment to show you just how much work there is to do in this space. And I'll use myself as an example. When I step into the classroom, what I see before me is a range of identities that I don't possess. The majority of my students have a combination of identities that might sound something like this. Female identifying, first generation student, Latina, potentially mother. My lived experience does not intersect at all with that. But as I step into that space, I'm expected to be the expert, and I have to draw on my experiences, and somehow I have to connect with those identities that I don't intersect with. And to assume that my students need to adapt to me is, I think, where we've always been traditionally, when really the burden is on us to take into consideration the identities and the lived experience of our students. And rather than assume that the student has to change for my benefit, I have the work to do to change for my students' benefit. And that, to borrow a phrase that was mentioned in a previous presentation, I was not trained in order to do that hard work. That hard work is introspective. It's hard to ask questions like, why am I treating my students in the way that I am treating them? And sometimes you find answers that you're not proud of. And to be able to step into that and lean into that is really a measure of emotional intelligence that we don't always bring in our interaction with students. So what we are proposing is, can we create or redefine the culture here so that regardless of your position on campus, a faculty member, a staff member, can we begin to rethink positionality, positions of power and oppression, positions of identity, so that we are no longer challenging our students in ways that they don't need to be challenged. They get it everywhere else. And how do we affirm the inherent worth of all of the individuals that we encounter on campus? And so, we would propose, in order to do this, whatever interventions we're deploying, some of the ones that Dr. Crone suggested or others, they have to be authentic, which means that we have to do that first introspective hard work and realize, how are we engaging our students in ways that don't affirm and respect their identities? They have to be distinct. To assume that one size fits all is going to help every student is a fallacy. And yes, we are in a new environment where we have to make the opportunities that we create open to all. We can still do that and still deploy strategic strategies that will help marginalized populations, but also transmit this new way of thinking to those who maybe don't need those same interventions at the same time. And we also have to acknowledge and respect the identities that our students are bringing to us. We don't always do that. And like I said, it's the default is to try and force an assimilation. And the literature is overwhelming about what harm that can do to people. And so we have to create a space for everybody and allow those differences to exist and be accepted, as Dr. Crone says. So all of this is going to take a lot of hard work by faculty and staff and students at the university. But in the long run, it's going to pay off, because it will allow our students to bring non-cognitive aspects of their experience forward into the learning environment so that it is synergistic with their learning. A good example of this is, think about the types of cultural wealth that our students bring because of all of their intersectional identities. Rather than ignoring the cultural wealth that's brought forward with different languages, different cultural experiences, create space for that to add synergistically into our learning. And that may require us to rethink our pedagogy for how to include that with our traditional disciplinary material. We also want to make sure that we are always centering the student and making sure that it is in an asset-based way. It is easy to default and say, what is wrong with a student and what do I need to fix in the student? What we are contending is, if we flip the script, we would then say it's not a problem that the students are bringing forward. It's a problem with the culture and the structure that they're coming into, and it is our burden to fix that, so that we are acknowledging the assets that they bring forward, and we are correcting the structural problems with where we are trying to educate them. And then finally, I think, even though there is going to be a need to focus down, This allows for the participation of every single faculty and staff member on campus. You can apply these ideas through the lens of any traditional assessment outcome that you want to. It takes a little bit of imagination and a lot of hard work at the front end to do it responsibly, but it provides the academic freedom in the departments and also allowing the staff to think about how they can get involved and propose unique and novel ideas that maybe we've never seen before. So we think there's a lot of space here and flexibility for the colleges and departments to really engage.
And just to close out a timeline that's going to look very similar to timelines you've already seen. First, we as a university would need to decide specifically where we want to focus here, and the outcome variables that would manifest from that focus. Year one, I would imagine, or year zero, as we heard earlier, I would imagine doing some faculty and staff professional development about the psychological concept, interventions that have worked in different ways, some of the varying results to make sure that we're not just assuming because one school did it, that it's going to have the exact same thing here. And really, I think of this as a like bottom up kind of approach, that where do different programs think that they could fit in here? We have some really great things in this area happening already at the university. So highlighting those, where can we give them more resources? Where can we expand the infrastructure? Where can we introduce the good ideas of one department or discipline to the university as a whole? And we would have units propose their initiatives to come to whatever group that we have, committee, task force, maybe synergize some of them wherever we can, maybe showcase them to see if other people want to be involved. And then year two, really starting to look at measuring belongingness at a university level. This would need some effort, and we would need to be able to do this with our students, but also to implement some of the pilot programs, and then see what's working, what needs to be tweaked or made better, and do continual improvements as we measure the key metrics in the last couple of years of the QEP. I think we're questions now. We're done. I'm sorry, the question period is over.
So earlier you said that you thought focusing on professional belonging might be a good way to go, and it seems like it may have some overlap with the second one. Do you see, how do you see those two maybe working together? Or maybe not, I don't know. Maybe that's in my mind.
No, I just think that I think the outcome or the mechanism is the same in both of them, but I think the initial focus is different. So if we wanted to build into this idea that by focusing on professional belonging, by making that a key avenue that we work here, these are the types of skills we would expect our students to come from. I think the other proposal is we're going to focus on those skills, and then it'll be manifested through these other areas. So I think there's overlap. Yeah, and I think that by definition, if you're making them feel more competent in their area of expertise, you should see belongingness increase as well. Yeah. Anytime you want to answer, you answer.
I was just going to make the comment. I think one of the things that I liked best about the presentation was the fact that you talked about those three different types of belonging. And it is tempting to sort of pick one and skew. We're doing well in this area, so we ought to really focus on the other. But I just wanted to comment. I think it's brilliant to focus on all three levels. I think there's work to be done in all three levels. The collegiate level in general, do I belong in college? Do I fit in here? Professional belonging. And I also think that tapping into our faculty members. I think if we got everybody here drunk or gave them truth serum, every one of us could relate a story, a period in our lives where a professional or community or, peer group of some sort, we had issues with whether we fit here, whether we fit in here. And I do think that faculty members being able to share those experiences with students, and in particular, faculty members coming from all of our different community segments, could be extremely powerful. So the thing I like best about the presentation is you don't have all your eggs in one basket. I think it's spectacular that you're trying to think about all three types. Extremely well done.
I do think from like an assessment standpoint, trying to do all of them at once becomes a lot. But if that is the direction the university wanted to go and was going to put their resources there, I think it's something we could do, but it would be a bigger one.
I think this is a great idea. I love it. I'm curious because I didn't hear anything. Are you going to be getting input from students on what it means to belong in those areas so that you sort of guide how you implement belonging?
Say something too. So yes, first, when we look at the psychological literature, when we look at our students, there's some things that we can predict. But any real intervention that we want to do, it needs to come from our students. It needs to be authentic in that way. The research shows us when organizations try to do boilerplate belongingness without looking at what the students actually feel or actually think, it does not work. Do you want to answer?
Yeah, I think, our students likely have experienced minoritization and marginalization along the entire trajectory of their educational experience. And it is so baked in that they may not know that it's happening or know the extent to which it is happening. So just as the faculty need to do some introspection and have some training and understanding of what it means, I think there's work to do on the student side as well to say, here, is this what you are experiencing? And if so, is that what you want to experience? You hear it said a lot, there's a difference between a Hispanic enrolling and then a Hispanic serving institution. What is the difference between the two? In order to answer a question like that, you have to apply a critical lens to everything. And that would include the student experience from their perspective as well. So I think as part of measuring belongingness, there is an inherent baseline that has to be taken. What are our students experiencing? And then as we begin to narrate through change, students have to understand what they're going through and then be able to articulate what are the real and perceived benefits of that experience. So that's a very sophisticated ask of the students. This is a tough thing to try and tackle, but any changing culture is a generational endeavor. So I think this is a great start as a 5-year project, but if we abandon it after 5 years, then we could do more harm than good. This is one of those things where you really have to commit long term and do that hard work. So to your point, I think we can't ignore the student experience.
We have a question from online. So the question is, how much does a sense of belonging come from the social relationships versus a relationship with an institution?
I think it depends on the type of belonging that you're looking for. And even the institutional-based belongingness is going to come from social interactions. So I think that we would need to really focus on social psychological interventions. We would need to make sure that we are tackling social interactions at multiple levels. So like Jerry was talking about, everyone can be involved here. The faculty-student relationship, the student staff relationship, the student-student relationship, those are all key mechanisms that need to be leveraged if we're going to really try to move the needle here. Yeah.
Just to put a fine point on that, I mean, think about a good example of minoritized and marginalized population are pregnant individuals. How is the institution structured to allow for their participation on a day-to-day on campus? Do we have facilities set up for once they give birth? Do they have lactation rooms on campus? There are so many different small elements of structural, behavioral, cultural change that can make a world of difference for somebody's daily experience here. That alone could mean the difference between whether or not a student decides to come to campus today or not. Do they have a safe space to engage in that activity for the benefit of their family? And if we are ignoring those needs, we're continuing to ignore already marginalized groups. What are the voices that we don't traditionally hear from, and why are we not hearing those voices? It's probably because we didn't invite them to the table.
And that would be part of that hard initial work of making sure we create a safe space for students, faculty, and staff to share those little small things, those tiny things sometimes that just made them question, do I fit here, or do I need to put on that mask? Do I need to do code switching? What needs to happen here so that I can fit in and be accepted?
Great presentation. Just as a follow-up to, as you were saying, small things for a better understanding of those who are here as well as online, especially our students. Could you please give an example of the type of programming you are proposing for each of these belongings, the college, UHD, and the field? And this is, since it's a proposal, just examples.
So I'll give you an example of programming we engaged in our college this semester, and we do it annually, although it should be more than an annual event. We did an Emerging Voices in STEM event where we said, let's invite the voices of relatively newly minted scientists, right? Relatively younger than the faculty that the students see every day, and that represent a diverse set of experiences and identities that they may not be seeing in the representative faculty in front of them. And let those individuals speak to their lived experiences, the challenges that they faced and were able to overcome in order to be successful in their degree programs. And while I could have said this is what it takes to be successful, it's a lot different when it comes from somebody who is closer in age to our students, is closer in their lived experience to our students, and there's an overlap in the identities that they share so that there's a broader sense of connectiveness to the message that's being conveyed. That doesn't take a lot of effort in order to engage in programming like that, but it's intentional. It's thought-provoking, and it's speaking to voices that do not occupy the dominant group within a discipline that controls almost everything about that discipline. So that's just one example.
Some other things that we could think about is, building off the good things that are already being done. The first-year seminars have had belongingness baked into them in some ways, looking at what's working there, where do they need more financial support, where do they need more class side support, faculty support, how can we bolster those programs already doing good things. When we look at our first generation students, it's equipping them. It's teaching them the things that they may not know right now and not assuming that they should know them. One thing that you can do is helping educate parents. of first-generation students, so that you can start to build that at-home support. And at UHD, that probably means offering sessions in multiple languages, so that makes sure that that community is being built outside of these walls as well. One thing that we would have to do is we'd really have to think about how to foster this in an online and an in-person space. And then building off peer mentoring. We've had some successes with peer mentoring here at UHD. We've had some not successes. But looking at peer institutions that have done it well, that they've seen students be actively involved, peer mentoring really often is a silver bullet with this kind of initiative. Those are just some examples real quick. Thank you.
A big round of applause for all our 3 topic proposal presenters. Wonderful presentation. I would like to call upon Provost Barleon to say the final remarks. Thank you.
I'd like to thank all of our presenters. We have 3 extremely strong QEP proposals that are on the table. This is, when we're looking at the QEP, this isn't one department, one college. It really is the university across the board. And it's not just faculty, it's staff, students. So it's the whole university community coming together to take a look at how do we enhance and strengthen the programs in the opportunities that we have on our campus. So in looking at these 3 proposals, and everyone did a fabulous job in their presentations, it's thinking about how do we move forward. And I believe Dr. Johnson mentioned, with the QEP as part of the accreditation process, it is a 5-year program. But many times an institution will take what is their QEP and institutionalize that and build it in. And that's something that whichever direction we decide to go into, that's what we have to consider. We have to take a look at how do we take this and make it who we are and continue to build upon that and to enhance that. And we'll have a new QEP down the road and, 10 years, 12 years down the road. But it will be something, though, as we're looking at these QEP proposals. What is it that we want to do as an institution, and how do we build that into the fabric of who we are? So again, thank you. Please join me in another round of applause for all of our presenters. It's important to vote and to provide your feedback, because that information is going to be helpful as we move this forward. So again, your voice is important, your feedback is important, and again, as a community, we need to come together to take a look at how do we move UHD further along in meeting the needs of our students, meeting the needs of our faculty and staff, and building a community that truly is focused on enhancing that holistic experience. So thank you all for being here today. Thank you to the individuals who have joined us online. This is such an important part of just the whole process, but it is important for us to think about moving forward and what we need to do. So don't forget to provide your feedback. We'll have opportunities and we'll be sending out reminders, but thank you for being a part of this process. It's very, very much appreciated. And again, it is who we are as a community. Thank you. I don't know, Divya, did you have any other comments or just?
Thank you, Dr. Baudelaire. And thank you so much for coming together. This is just the starting point. please, as Provost Bartlein was saying, do vote, do complete the surveys. We want to hear your voice. This is an institutional project, and it's not that it won't go beyond the 5-year mark. We can institutionalize it, and that's the reason why we need your support, we need your vote, we need your feedback, and do help us with that. And thank you so much, and I appreciate everything. The entire QEP Steering Committee, a round of applause for them. Thank you very much.